Hi everybody and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, my name is Orlagh and I make videos on a variety of topics because I don't want to be pigeonholed. And today we are going to be discussing the pros and the cons of living in Madrid. So I've been living in Madrid now since 2016, so that's 5 years. I'm from the UK, I'm British/Irish, and I've lived in a couple of countries before moving to Spain, but this is the longest we've ever stayed in the one place, apart from obviously growing up in our childhood homes and things like that. So yeah, I want to talk to you a bit about the advantages of living here in Madrid and the disadvantages, in case you're looking to move here or in case you are just curious. So a little disclaimer, these are obviously my own personal opinions, this is my lived experience here in Madrid. You might agree, which is great, you might disagree, which is also great, so take it with a pinch of salt if you want, but these are my pros and cons of living in Madrid. Okay, so the first pro is going to be no surprise, the weather. Even in winter it tends to be quite sunny and bright. Of course there's a couple of cloudy days, but in general the skies are nearly always blue, and of course it's very sunny even now, which isn't great for filming because it does make my videos look a bit yellowy tinted, but it's great for the rest of your life, so you know. So we have spring as normal and autumn. They do tend to be kind of shorter, the transitional seasons here, and then winter does get cold. I think some people are surprised by that, but it's not as cold as other places, but you still do need to layer up and turn on the central heating and things like that. And then summer is long and it's hot. I think the highest it's ever reached has been about 42 degrees, if I remember correctly. That's obviously in degrees Celsius, not in Fahrenheit, because I know when people say it's 100 degrees today and they mean Fahrenheit, that always blows my mind because I automatically think they're living in the fiery pits of hell, when in fact it's just another unit of measurement. Madrid has a lot of green areas. I feel like some people are surprised when I say that, but luckily we are fortunate to live quite close to Casa de Campo, which is a massive big green space, and really when you're there in the middle of the forest it doesn't even really feel like you're in a capital city at all, and that's really important to me. I like having green areas nearby. It is nice and not always that common in a capital city to have so much green space, so that's definitely a bonus if that's something that is important for you. And then linked to that is just the geographical location of Spain itself. Sol, which is the city centre of Madrid, is the very centre point of Spain, which means that Madrid is a perfect place for travelling to other parts of Spain. You have Valencia, which is close by, Barcelona's not too far away, Segovia, Toledo. There's so many towns and cities and places that are quite close to Madrid, and then even if you want to go to the north or south, it's not too far away. You can get in a car, you can go by plane or by train. I'm trying to think of all the methods of transport then. But it's really well connected, so in that case it's a really good base. And also linking the green area spaces to the location, it also has beautiful mountains, so it's easy to get to the mountains by car or by public transport, and lots of people go skiing in the winter here in Madrid, which again quite a lot of people are surprised by. I think they don't necessarily associate Spain with skiing in general, but there are lots of cool options like that. I've still not been skiing actually. I think I love the idea of it in theory, but I think I just prefer to have a hot chocolate and kind of, you know, I'll do the après-ski part, I'll do that part. So one really big pro about living in Madrid is the cost. Compared to other capital cities in Europe, it's definitely one of the cheaper ones, and I do find your money does go a lot further here, which is obviously great, it's the dream. And I actually a couple of months ago did a what I spend in a week living in Madrid video, and looking through some of the comments, a lot of people were surprised at how affordable it was here compared to other places, so that's definitely a positive point. Madrid has great public transport links. The monthly travel pass on the metro for unlimited travel for the month, if you're over the age of 26, is 56 euros per month, and that includes the metro, buses, cercanías, which are like the longer distance trains, and that compared to London, for example, where I have friends who say they spend that in like 1 week on public transport, is obviously a lot more cost effective and affordable. And if you're under the age of 26, you can actually get that metro card for, I think it's about 20 euros, which is great, and then obviously they have discounts for senior citizens too. And in terms of reliability, the metro is great. It's, in general, it's clean, it comes on time. Same for the buses, they're never, in my hometown for example, the bus could be supposed to come at 12 o'clock and it could be 12:15 and there's no bus in sight. So, why is my throat going? Okay, in terms of food, aka one of my favourite topics, it's brilliant to see more and more vegan options available by the day. I'd say now Madrid is definitely a vegan friendly city and it's improving every single day. Something's popping up, there's more options on menus in non-vegan restaurants. So for a city which is like the capital of jamon iberico and all of these kind of Spanish meats and things like that, it's great to see that it's becoming really, really vegan friendly. And in terms of fruit and vegetables and things like that, they are really affordable. It's still very common here to have greengrocers, whereas in the UK, for example, it isn't common anymore to do your shopping in separate shops, whereas here you can go to the greengrocers and get things that are fresh and delicious and tasty. I think compared to other cities, I had a friend who told me that the last time she went to New York, she paid $9 for a bag of carrots. That blew my mind. Honestly, we can get a week's worth of fruit and vegetables for €9 from that shop, so that's definitely a plus. There is a great coffee culture in Madrid if you're a fan of going out for a specialty coffee, if you like that kind of coffee scene, which I'm a massive fan of. There are amazing coffee shops. There are so many good neighbourhoods that have great coffee, or brunch places and things like that, which is my favourite thing to do on the weekend. I'm more of a go for a coffee person than a go for a beer person, so that's brilliant. But if you're more somebody who does prefer the kind of nightlife, there are loads of clubs and bars, and it's very much an outdoor culture here. If you are, I mean, I'm obviously talking pre-COVID, but if you are somebody who likes to go out for a couple of drinks and have an atmosphere, sit outside on a terrace and have like a couple of snacks and a drink, that's definitely something that's very common here, which I know a lot of people love. There are so many cultural things to do here in Madrid too. There is the Reina Sofia, the Prada Museum, Museum of Madrid History in the centre, which is one of the most beautiful buildings ever. It's one of my favourites. And there is a lot of art exhibitions and pop-up things going on, and there's always something to see, which is great if you're a fan of the kind of artsy culture side, which is always great if you fancy doing something along those lines. There are many different neighbourhoods in Madrid, and a lot of them are really varied. You have the more traditional neighbourhoods like La Latina, which has all the traditional architecture, which has lots of vintage shops and antiques and markets and things going on like that. You have Malasaña, which is like the trendier neighbourhood, which has a lot of coffee shops and things like that going on. And you have Lavapiés, which is very multicultural. That's the neighbourhood, I'd say, with the most ethnically diverse population. So there you always have like the best restaurants if you're looking for food that isn't Spanish. And then you have the more upmarket neighbourhoods like Salamanca, which are often more expensive and have like the designer shops and things like that. And then there's loads more, but you do have a lot of variation between the neighbourhoods, which keeps it quite interesting. Every neighbourhood has its own quite distinct feel. So it's not really a city that just has a city centre and then it kind of goes out. You have kind of pockets of different places everywhere, which I think is really fun. It does keep things quite interesting. Madrid is definitely an LGBTQ+ friendly city. Troika is known as the gay district, which is a neighbourhood that's quite central. You can see lots of same-sex couples walking around holding hands. I've never heard of anybody experiencing any hate here because of who they are with or who they identify as. There are a lot of drag nights and things like that that are going on, and in general the city has a very accepting feel, which I think obviously is very important. So that's great to see, because obviously not every city is like that, and that's awful. So that's really good that Madrid is, and I think in general Spain is, but I'm just talking about Madrid for this video, so I don't know about other parts of Spain, but that's obviously really great. And then in terms of the people in general, everybody's friendly. In terms of culture, it's quite tactile. People greet with dos besos, which is the 2 kisses. And I'd say in general, Spanish people are more open in terms of body language and touching and things like that, compared to British people, who in general I do think we seem to be a bit more reserved. So I'd say that is a positive if that's something that you think is good, although maybe you're like, stay away from me, who knows. Okay, so let's move on to the cons. Okay, so the first con I see a lot of immigrants who move here say is, and I've experienced this myself as well, is the bureaucracy in general is quite slow. So if you need to make an appointment, if you need to go and open a bank account, if you need to, I don't know, change your Wi-Fi details, all of these kind of structural things that we all have to do from time to time, the process can be slow and can be quite complicated, and often you're sent to one office to find out it's closed, or you're sent back to another office. Banks, for example, close at 2:30 or 3 p.m. every day, which I think nowadays is just a bit unacceptable. It's just crazy to me that the banks could be shut then. And then there are some quite weird rules around banking. So sometimes if you want to make an appointment, you can't just go to a branch of your bank, you have to go to the original branch that you registered for your account in, which is really inconvenient. Maybe you've moved, maybe you want to go to the branch that's closest to your work or something like that. So things like that can be a bit of a bugbear, and you definitely need to kind of approach the situation quite relaxed. If you're used to things being done in quite like a timely way, I think that can be quite frustrating. And linked to that, I'd say in general, although of course there are exceptions, customer service isn't great, and that's coming from a Brit. I think if you were American, you'd think even more so the customer service wasn't great. Again, there are exceptions that are the places I love to go to all the time, like the restaurants and the coffee shops, where they're lovely and they're chatty, but they are the places that tend to cater more to maybe an international audience. In shops, for example, it's not uncommon to be stood there waiting while people are chatting and they don't even acknowledge you're there. Or for example, in a supermarket where there's a really long queue, maybe there's like 8 or 9 people waiting, and in other countries I've lived in, they'd open another till to accommodate those extra customers. Whereas here, in some supermarkets they might do, but it's definitely not a blanket rule that they would. So things like that can be a bit of a pain. Again, it's something you've got to adapt to. Sometimes you have to be a bit more direct in restaurants to get service, like waving your hand and things like that, which is never something I'd do in the UK. Obviously while being very polite, but I think if you're used to especially the American style of service, I think you would be a bit shocked at the service here sometimes. Okay, so let's talk money. In general, salaries in Spain are not great, and just because we're in a capital city doesn't mean that the salaries are that much better for it. Again, if you're living and working in Spain and you're happy with the life-work balance, which is why we lived here, we wanted a good life-work balance and the weather and all of the other advantages that I've discussed before, then it's fine. Your money will go fine here, and that's great. It's definitely not a place where you're going to earn the big bucks and be able to save a massive proportion of your income, unless you are here with an international company maybe who have settled you here and it's that kind of thing, maybe. But in general, the Spanish wage for Spanish people is low, and the Spanish wage for people who come, immigrants to the country, is also low. So that's definitely something to bear in mind. Again, cost of living is lower, so it does balance out. But if you're planning on living here to save to then buy a house in the UK or something like that, I don't really think it's the place for that necessarily. So there's a Spanish song, I'll try and find a clip if I can find it somewhere, but it translates to something like Madrid is great, but it doesn't have the beach. And it's true. Madrid has got everything, as I said before, but we don't have the coast. And as somebody who lived and grew up next to the sea, I do really like being near the sea, even if I'm not, I don't know, swimming there every day or actually going to the beach. I do like being near the coast. And obviously that's something that Madrid doesn't have. So in that respect, I know some people prefer to move to Barcelona. I've been to Barcelona a couple of times now, and personally I feel like Madrid is a better place to live and Barcelona is a better place to visit. But that's just my personal opinion. So arguably the next point is not specifically a Madrid thing, it's a Spanish thing in general, but maybe a con for you could be the schedule of the day. The Spanish work day is longer, everything's a little bit later on in the day, so lunchtime is 2 till 3 for example, dinner time is 9:30, 10, later. So if you're somebody who's an early bird who wants to go and be able to get lunch at a restaurant at 12 o'clock, a lot of restaurants shut in the middle of the day, or maybe they're open for snacks but their kitchen is closed. So if you're an early bird, I do think you need to make some adjustments to make up for that, because if you want to go to a restaurant at 7 o'clock for dinner, it's probably going to be closed. So that's not really a con for us because we're naturally kind of more night owls, but it is definitely something to bear in mind. And we've definitely been in that position where we've thought, let's go and have an early dinner to escape the crowds, and then we arrived there because we didn't check, because you know, only to find out it's closed. So that is something to bear in mind. And I actually found out a really interesting fact the other day, that geographically Spain, we should be on the same time zone as the UK and Portugal, because back in World War II Franco basically changed the time zone and matched it to Germany's time zone to show his solidarity for Nazi Germany. So let's change that back already. I think we need to just get rid of time zones completely. I definitely feel crappier when the time zones change back an hour or go forward an hour. And that definitely could be a reason to account for the fact that everything's slightly later here in Spain, because internally I don't feel like it should be as late as it is. But schedule wise, that's definitely something to bear in mind. Okay, something that's quite interesting if you're looking to move to Madrid to rent and not to buy a place is, in general, the housing market doesn't put a lot of effort into rented places. So unless you're spending a lot of money on a renovated flat, maybe in the north of Madrid, or maybe you are able to afford somewhere in Salamanca, like I said, which is a lot more expensive and recently renovated, the standard Spanish flat, when it's rented out, isn't given that normal facelift. What I mean by that is, in the UK, for example, it's quite typical if you're about to rent your flat out to people that you strip it back to be quite bare and to be quite neutral. So everything's painted white. There isn't any really offensive, ugly furniture in the flat if you're going to do it furnished. Okay, maybe it ends up looking a little bit like IKEA's recent new catalogue, but at least it's neutral and at least it's quite basic. That doesn't really seem to be the case here in Madrid. In any of the flats we've rented and in our friends' flats and other flats we've seen, it's quite common. If you could look behind this artfully placed clothes rail, we have this really big awful wooden unit in our lounge, and this flat was one of the more modern flats we came across. So in general, that might be a problem for you if you are not really keen on the idea of putting up with it for the meantime. Maybe that means you have to look for somewhere that's unfurnished, or maybe you have to look for somewhere that's a bit more modern. And in terms of renting, things move very, very quickly here. It wouldn't be possible to look for a flat to move into in 2 months' time or a month's time and reserve it. You very much need to come here, get an Airbnb for a couple of weeks or a hotel while you look around, and then 9 times out of 10 when you go to see the flat, you kind of need to put a deposit down there and then. So that's definitely something to bear in mind when it comes to renting. So this has definitely improved a lot, but something worth noting is the amount of people who smoke is still really quite high. So if you're somebody like me who just absolutely hates smoking, if you're outside or in a public terrace, or if you're having a beer at a restaurant, people still do smoke quite a lot. And when I say this to some people, they do laugh because they say it's a lot less than before, but compared to a lot of other cities, it's definitely still higher. So that can be a bit of a con, definitely. In terms of food, Spanish food is great and delicious and I like it a lot, but in comparison to other capital cities, there's not necessarily the same variety of restaurants. Again, it's improving all the time, and you definitely can find Japanese, Korean, Chinese, you can find Mexican, you can find kind of traditional British food, American diner style. You can find a lot of different, and Indian food as well. But they tend to be a bit more difficult to find, I'd say, in comparison to London, for example, where these restaurants are littered everywhere. And if you order something here that's spicy, it's not spicy. So ask for it like extra, extra spicy, because in general, the Spanish palate is not accustomed to a lot of spice. So that's something to bear in mind if you want a curry, because normally they cater it to like a Spanish palate. I'd say in general, Madrid is quite a loud city in some parts. People can be up and partying until quite late at night, but then again, it depends on the neighbourhood. Luckily, our neighbourhood is quite quiet, so we can go in and out when we want that kind of atmosphere, but it's not necessarily on our doorstep, which is great. And then a final thing about my experience as well with meeting people here, I'd say a lot of Spanish people tend to stick with the people they met with in school. So it's very common to still have a very close-knit group of school friends, work friends, and your family. So it can be hard to break into that circle sometimes. I'd say most of the friends I have here who speak Spanish are actually from Argentina or other places like that. I have Spanish friends, but it is hard to get into their real core inner circle sometimes because they already have quite an established network. So that is something to bear in mind, but there are so many meetups and things like that here. There are no shortages of meeting people from all different countries. So there's always somebody to meet up with and things like that, which is great. And I've definitely made a lot of firm friendships while being here, but not necessarily with only Spanish people, even though I speak Spanish. So overall, Madrid is definitely a really great place to live, even with the couple of cons I mentioned. The pros are massive. I really love it. We've been here 5 years, which seems But that is everything. I hope you enjoyed this video. Let me know in the comments down below if you've ever thought about moving to Madrid. Is it somewhere that you'd like to live, or do you live somewhere else? Let me know, and I hope this video was interesting, and I hope to see you again around these parts soon. Thank you, take care, bye.